Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Suited and Booted. Yes, we are not in the studio. We're in a beautiful hotel somewhere in the city. To my right, we have...
Lord Mahazi.
To my left...
GD, Gavin Denise.
And today we are joined by who I consider, and many consider to be the voice of Australian football, Australia's favourite Mancunian metalhead, Simon Hill. How you going, Simon?
Good to be with you guys.
Just quickly on that, is it pronounced Green Manalishi?
Green Manalishi.
Now, is it a cover band?
It's a heavy metal cover band. Yeah, we play the 80s British heavy metal classics: Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Motorhead, Judas Priest.
Who's your favourite band out of all those?
Probably Maiden. I love Iron Maiden. Going to see them in September.
Oh, they're coming here, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yep. No, you guys don't know this about me, but I'm a bit of a metalhead.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a metalhead.
Well, you, Gavin's dad, and Simon.
Yeah.
I've got my whole leg tatted off ACDC.
And you got the hair for it.
Yeah, I do. Crazy enough, like my old man, my alarm clock when I was living at home was ACDC.
Really?
Blink 182.
Excellent.
He would wake me up playing the electric guitar.
Brilliant.
So all my youth was Blink, ACDC, Kiss, and fair play to my old man. He still plays today.
Good man.
He does,
Man of
yeah.
taste.
Yes,
I've seen him.
definitely.
I will say my favourite is Sabbath with Dio.
With Dio.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
controversial.
I know. I just love Dio for some reason.
Look, I love Ronnie James Dio as well. Rest his soul. But
yes.
I don't, I'm sorry, I'm a traditionalist, so I'm with Aussie. Yeah.
Love it. That felt good to get that. There's a little tidbit for you guys. I'm a metalhead.
Rash is just looking completely blank.
Rash is a Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson.
You know? He's a Jack Johnson.
Oh, my God.
And
You
a
know
John
what?
Mayer.
we got to get over this. The photo of me playing the guitar to my Korean teammates on the training pitch. It's the most embarrassing video I've ever...
I'll bring it up then.
And
Do you
also,
play a bit of guitar, do you, Rash?
Acoustic guitar, yeah.
I grew up with Rashid listening to Mrs. Higgins.
Missy Higgins.
Is that the most un-Australian thing you've ever
Mrs.
heard in your
Higgins.
life?
And I used to,
She sounds like a shit art teacher.
I'm not even joking. I used to sit on the train next to Rashid going to training. I'd have one earphone here and Rashid would be in the other, and we'd be just listening to John Mayer, Jack Johnson, and I'm trying to get ready for training.
Oh, you're horrible, man. Oh,
So
man.
do you do that only in Sydney? Or do you travel?
Yeah, well, if anybody would like to bring us on tour, then we would be
Maiden.
happy to come. But no, it's in Sydney. I think we have played one gig in Wollongong, so that was our little tour. It's a bit niche, obviously. So there's in Sydney at the moment there is a guy. His name's Lance, and he has basically got a lot of the Sydney metal bands together, and he does these metal nights. So we played in Camden, southwest Sydney, about 6 weeks ago. Played there before Christmas as well. We've done a gig in Chatswood over the last 6 months. So, it's not a weekly thing, but we rehearse every second Monday. And when the gigs come along, we go play. We love it.
Are the legs hurting as you age with the double kick?
See, unfortunately, now Filthy Animal Taylor brought in the double kick, the Motorhead drummer.
Yeah.
And that was after I started playing. So I'm not great at the double kick. I can do it, but I'm not great at it. But the worst bit now about playing as I age, and I'm in my mid-50s now, is lugging the kit about because it's heavy stuff. So you've done a workout before you even start playing. So that's the most difficult. I'm getting too old for it, really. As my dad used to say when I was a kid, I wish you were playing the bloody flute because he used to have to help me with all this stuff. So.
He's taking all the cymbals and everything.
And what's a rowdier crowd, a metal crowd or a soccer crowd?
Well, to be honest, the metal crowds that we play at are probably only about 10 or 15 deep. So, mind you, some A-League games are getting that way. But yeah, I think that the metal crowd, we get a bit of a bad rap. It's actually quite a nice community.
I'm telling you, Rash,
because it's niche.
They're the nicest people on earth. Metalheads are the nicest people on earth.
What?
Yep. My cousin got me into this, which I would have never even thought of it.
It's a brotherhood, isn't it?
It's a brotherhood. Like they're all, yes, at shows, they're headbanging, they're moshing, whatever, might punch you. But it's in love.
Well, it's a very unique music taste, right? And I feel like everyone, if you ask them what music they like, they'll say, "Oh, a bit of everything except metal."
Yeah.
That's what everyone
Or
says, right?
they say, "Oh, I like a bit of metal. I used to like Bon Jovi." No,
No. Yeah, because metalheads don't like glam metal, like the real metalheads, don't they?
no. There's a certain genre of sort of what I would term soft metal.
Yeah.
That I cannot stand.
Yeah. It's got to be heavy.
but-
Yeah, which
it's
is
gotta be
like
heavy.
what Bon Jovi surely isn't
Bon
soft metal.
Jovi is one.
Is that soft metal? That's considered soft metal.
It's what's it? They call it cock rock, basically.
Isn't Guns N' Roses and stuff like that?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, look, I grew up in Britain, so I'm very heavily influenced by the British heavy metal. I'm not big on American metal bands. I think, to my ears, they sound very formulaic.
Yeah.
And certainly in the modern day, there are. It seems to me that there are two types of new age metal band.
Yep.
They're either Linkin Park wannabes, so that's sort of like the fusion of
With rap.
and metal, or they're Slipknot wannabes, so everything's rah, 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 rah. And I like a bit of Slipknot, but I don't want to listen to 85 bands that sound the same as them. And I like Linkin Park, but I don't want to listen to 85 Linkin Park sound-alikes.
Well, Britain started it, to my knowledge, heavy metal, like Deep Purple and
Sabbath with the
Sabbath.
with the
You've got the
grandfathers.
weirdest knowledge. He knows a little bit about
It's great. I
everything.
thought we were going
It's
to talk about
insane.
football. This is much
Fuck football. I'm so sick of football. We're talking about metal this whole pod. The whole pod, we're just going to be...
Bringing the heavy metal fans across.
Yeah, that's it. No, I just...
Deep Purple.
Obviously, my cousin... We're going to get off metal. But my cousin got me into Metallica, and then I just started getting... Once you know one band, and then you find another, and another, and another, and another. And some of the best docos I've ever watched are metal docs.
Yeah.
Where they...
There's all sorts of subgenres throughout
Yep.
metal as well. So there's symphonic metal. I don't know if you've heard of Nightwish. I love Nightwish.
like orchestral.
Yeah, almost orchestral
Yeah.
metal. And there's black metal and there's death metal and there's all sorts of different sort of genres within.
Could you ever do... I could never do black metal. It was a bit too
Probably
far for me. Like, okay, you're burning churches and stuff. Okay, it's a bit...
Yeah, okay.
Black metal is...
at the end of the spectrum.
That is like Norwegian or Scandinavian black metal is
Yeah.
heavy. Like
That's
blood on
where
stage.
metal is at its peak.
Yeah.
It's the Scandinavian countries in particular love metal.
Yeah, they love metal.
Iceland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland.
It's
Brilliant.
crazy.
Yeah.
All right,
Probably 'cause
fine.
it's cold.
We'll talk about football.
What our podcast is about.
I didn't want to, but fine. Simon, I wanted to ask about... Give us sort of a dot point timeline of when you decided you wanted to work in broadcasting and then how you got to the A-League. I know it's very long, but sort of give us the timeline of that.
I'll try and make it the abridged
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
Look, I think really thinking back, I always wanted to be involved in football ever because I was so passionate about it. My dad introduced me to Man City when I was 5 years old. I didn't have any choice because he's a City fan. My granddad was a City fan. My great granddad played for City in the 1890s, even before they were called Manchester City. They were Ardwick FC. So that's my family lineage is all Manchester City. So my dad took me to my first game when I was 5 or 6 years old, and from that moment on, I was just completely besotted with the game, with City in particular to start off with, and with Colin Bell, who was my favourite player. Again, I know long before your time. So I think obviously initially I wanted to be a footballer, but that changed at age 12, and I say this in my book, which is still available, by the way.
Go get that. We'll put the link.
When I was about 12 or 13, I was playing for a local club in Manchester, and the coach told us at training on the Tuesday night, there's a City scout coming down on Sunday. And I was like, oh, this is me. This is my moment. Anyway, the scout came down on the Sunday. I ran around like a blue-ass fly for 90 minutes. Didn't even look at me. Wasn't interested. And it was afterwards I learned that he'd already made his money. He was coming to watch our goalkeeper.
Yeah.
A kid called Steve Crompton, who went on to win the FA Youth Cup with City in the mid-80s.
There you go.
And he's still a friend of mine today. So from that moment onwards, I knew in my heart of hearts, I wasn't good enough to be a footballer. So I think even in, germinating in my mind was, how do I work in football? How do I work in football? So the next best thing for me was journalism. So even when I was 12 or 13, I was thinking about, how do I get a career in journalism? Now, I wanted to write. That was my thing. So when I graduated from university in Portsmouth in 1990, I managed to get a place on the National Council for the Training of Journalists pre-entry in newspaper journalism course. It was quite a mouthful. Yeah. So that's where I started my training. And within a couple of weeks, I was fortunate in the refectory at the college that I was at. There was a guy who was a football fan. I think he was a Leeds United fan. And we got talking, and he said, I write match reports for the local paper, the Portsmouth News, on the youth team, Portsmouth. He said, but I'm going back to Leeds in a couple of weeks because my course is finishing. Do you want me to put your name forward? I was, God, yeah. Of course. So that's how I started. So that, even when I was at college, I started writing for the newspaper. Then in 1991, I finished all my studies, and middle of the big recession in the UK, I was applying for lots of jobs. There were no jobs. And almost out of desperation, I spotted an advert in the graduate press for a commercial copywriter, which was writing the adverts for a local radio station in South Wales. So I thought, well, that's writing. Yep. So I applied for it. Got the thin letter back, you thought, the rejection letter. And it was, but they said, look, we note your experience in sports journalism. We have a job here as a sports reporter. Would you be interested in applying for that? So my career took a left field diversion right from the start, and I got the job at Red Dragon Radio in South Wales as a sports reporter, and that's how it started. How I came to Australia in 2003, I'd worked for the BBC for 10 years, and then in 2001 I went to ITV. They started up a new channel. I went there thinking this is me for the next 20 years, and within 12 months the channel went bankrupt. So we were all out of work in 2002. I went to the World Cup as a fan, Japan and Korea, and at the end of my trip I tagged on 5 days to come to Australia to see a mate of mine who'd emigrated out here. I used to work with him at the BBC. He's a Manc like me, he's a City fan, so that's why we're friends. And whilst I was over here doing the tourist sites of Sydney, he said, there's a job going at SBS. They need a commentator because the other guy's gone. And I was like, well, they don't know me from Adam. I live on the other side of it. No, I'm telling you, you'd be good for it. I'll put in a word for you. I was like, yeah, all right. And he went on and on and on about it. And I said, listen, when I go back to England, I'll send a CV. And I did. And I thought that'll be the end of it. And to my amazement, Ken Shipp, who's still there at SBS, came back to me via email and said, look, we're interested. I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. I had no ties in London at the time. So I was like, well, let's go and do something different. Thinking it would be for 2 or 3 years. So I'm still here.
How old were you there, Simon?
I was 34.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the BBC, you were covering everything, Premier League, Championship.
Yeah.
Commentary?
Yes, but radio commentary.
Commentary.
I was on Radio 5 Live, which is the main sports network for the BBC.
Can I just ask, because sometimes when I get in my football frantic modes, I just want to listen to anything and everything and whatever. And sometimes I'll chuck on Talk Sport. People have their opinions on Talk Sport. But being a radio commentator, you have to paint a picture.
Yeah.
How different is it to just normal commentary with the visuals?
TV. It's the same skill, but almost reversed. Okay. And it took me a while, to be honest, to make the transition. Some would say I've still never done it, but in radio, obviously, silence is death.
Yep.
So you've got to keep going, and you've got to, as you say, be visually descriptive because people can only hear your voice. They're not able to see the pictures. So you've got to remember that they don't know where the ball is, for example. If they're tuning in and out after 10 minutes, you've got to remind them of the score because they can't see it on the top left-hand corner of the screen, which doesn't exist. Yep. So it's a slightly different skill. TV is more complementary. You're hopefully adding to what the viewer is seeing on the screen. And you don't have to say the ball's inside the centre circle. They can see that. So it's a little bit more hands off in some ways.
I've got so many questions running through my head. You started off by saying that you actually wanted to write.
Yeah.
And then now you've ended up speaking as your medium. Do you feel like that was your skill set, or you had to work really hard to push it away from writing to...
Yeah, in the early days, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of confidence in being a broadcaster. I was quite scared of the microphone, and certainly when I started in TV, you'll have experienced this. When there's a camera on you, you can talk into the mirror as much as you like and practice what you're going to say. But when that red light goes on and it's just you and the camera, it's bloody scary when you're inexperienced. So it takes a while for you to become comfortable. I've still got my very first tape of the first piece of television I ever did, which was a 15-second sports update on BBC News 24 in circa 2000 or 2001. And by that point, I'd been in radio for well over 10 years. So I was an experienced broadcaster. So I wasn't scared of being behind a microphone. But this was my first time on camera. And I sat there and I was nervous and sweating. And anyway, I got the 15 seconds out, no problem, no mistakes. And I walked off thinking, piece of cake. And the producer, a lady called Karen Mullally, I got the curly finger to come over. And she sat down and she said, okay, we're just going to go through it. And she picked out, I think it was 18 errors in 15 seconds.
What?
And I was like, wow. And she was spot on.
Yeah, wow.
Some of it was not necessarily what I'd done, but you'll remember this in the early 2000s that the waistcoats were very much in fashion. Yeah. So I had a stripy waistcoat on, which strobed on the screen. Yeah. I had a haircut at the time. Now you might not be able to see this, but the camera accentuates this. I've got one ear that sticks out very slightly. And when you have a very severe haircut, which I had in those days, which was the flat top. You remember the flat tops? Yeah. I had one of those, which is almost shaved at the sides. I look like the FA Cup. So she was like, if you're going to be regular on TV, you need to grow your hair a little bit longer. Okay, right. So there were all those little things, and I was slumped down in the seat, so you've got to sit up, and my head was very staccato in front of the... Now, if you think of TV is a one-dimensional medium, which it is, so if you're watching at home, if I'm just like that looking into the camera, I might be speaking very well, but you're going, geez, this guy looks like a mannequin. Yeah, right. Yeah. So there are all sorts of little techniques and skills that you can learn, and Karen was brilliant with me. So I'll just give you one very quick example, because I know I'm banging on a bit, but she told me to work on the cross theory when you're in front of a camera. I'll do it to this camera here. So when you're talking and it's just you and the camera, you're looking at the points on a compass, north, south, east and west. Is it the other way around? Anyway, so you're moving your head to the north and you're moving your head slightly to the west or to the east, or you're going down a little bit. And although that feels really unnatural doing that, when you look at it on camera, it shows that you're a human being that is living and breathing.
This is
and
crazy.
Moving. So there are all those little techniques. Other things when you're doing interviews. If I'm interviewing you and the camera's there, if I'm going, so Gav,
yes, how are you?
Yeah. And what's the thing that you can tell from what I'm doing wrong here?
You got your face back to the camera.
No, because they're shooting over my shoulder. But what they're doing is this big fat shoulder here.
It's covering me.
Is covering you, and it's getting in the way. So they teach us to work on the V theory, which is if you think that I'm on one side, you're on the other, and you open your body up, and do it like that.
Yeah.
So there is space between the camera. To shoot.
So basically, you're saying I'm fucked, Simon.
No, not at all. Yeah. But all those little techniques you have to learn.
It's incredible. And I think you've sort of spoken on this, how, there's this funny thing of, everyone starts a podcast now. Everyone thinks they can be on social media and be an influencer. But it's like, there's so many little things that to perfecting the art. And talking about SBS back in the days, like that was
pinnacle.
what an iconic era that was.
Yeah.
You know,
Rest in peace, Les Murray.
Oh, that's what I mean.
yeah.
Is there a way of learning? Do they teach you that, or is there a school you can go to, or do they just throw you in the deep end and just correct you along the way?
I mean, there are training courses. Certainly these days, when I was a student, there were no broadcast journalism degrees. You could do postgrad training courses, but in those days, no. But today, there are all sorts of courses. So they do learn a lot of that stuff. But still, I see in the mainstream media, and maybe it's because I'm getting old and crotchety, but there's a lot of youngsters that are coming through now are still making those very basic mistakes, and they're not being corrected, and that's because of time constraints, financial constraints. They don't employ trainers anymore. Can't afford it.
Do you think, well, there's a few points I want to make on that. Brilliant point. The first thing is, a lot of these, so your Sky Sports, your Optus Sport or whatever, they want to move with the times. So a lot of them are bringing in these influencers to do smaller shows.
Yeah.
I have friends in the UK that I would consider they're not broadcasters. They're influencers who have opinions on football, but because they have a good following or whatever, they come in and they're not what you would call classically trained. So sometimes it is a bit hard to watch because you're like, wow, this isn't very pleasant, but I guess they're trying to move with the times and like, oh, the most followers wins, or,
Pretty much.
the most eyes on this or whatever. And then even on that, how as a commentator do you have to lift your game? I shouldn't even say lift your game, but what do you have to do differently? Because say I'm watching football in 1990. I can't scroll on my phone and look at live stats. I can't scroll on my phone and look at live updates and videos and footage and everything. Modern football fans have the world at their fingertips. They know everything. How do you stay engaging while you're on air? Like, do you have to come with crazier facts that they don't even know? Like, how does that work?
You do your research.
Yeah.
That's the basic tenet of being a half-decent commentator. If you're not prepared, the old saying, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Yeah. So you have to be ready for every different scenario. And just to give you one example, obviously we're down in Melbourne at the moment, and I did the Newcastle Spurs game the other night. Now, everybody knows about Alexander Isak and James Maddison and Son Heung-min, but I spent hours and days researching all the other young kids that were on the tour that people don't know, because I have to be ready in case they come on. And most of them did.
They all came on.
They all came on.
The whole squad came on.
And that can be very tricky visually, particularly, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not 100% keen on these games, is that because there's normally 25 substitutions, which makes not only a game very disjointed, it makes it very hard for a commentator, because the team that started is unrecognisable from the one that finishes. Yeah. And you're having to readjust your thought process to take in all these new names. Problem I had with Newcastle at the MCG, where you were 100 metres away from the pitch on the far side, they're playing in black and white shirts with red numbers.
You're not seeing anything.
You can't see them.
No.
They're just blobs on the back. Spurs are a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of little issues that crop up, and you've got to be able to deal with those. If necessary, talk around them. If you can't find a solution to who's that guy on the ball on the far side, the 18-year-old that I've never seen before, you've got to be able to talk around that sort of stuff, and you've got to be able to react to very real live pressures. For example, at the end of the Newcastle Spurs game, there was a penalty shootout. We didn't know.
Did you weren't
Nobody
told
us. Yeah. No, we didn't know. Ange Postecoglou didn't know.
Oh, mate.
So, you've got to... when Harp said it, and Harp's only knew because he heard it on the PA. I didn't hear it because I was commentating. So when he said it, I looked at him, I said, a what? Which, in the end became funny. That was on mic. That was on mic. Because we didn't know. But anyway, that's just live telly, and sometimes things go wrong, and you've got to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, the fact that it's live is incredible, because even if something goes to someone's voicemail, and I know I don't get a second take at this, I get rattled. The fact that we're doing this, we can cut it out if we completely stuff it up or whatever. gives you a little bit of a calm. But when there's
we had an
live.
incident on my radio show a couple of years ago. Alicia Carnivas, who does our women's segment, it was actually her debut on the show, and she got carjacked live on air.
What?
Yeah, literally. She was pulled over in a side road in Brisbane doing the radio cross on her phone, and a car pulled up alongside, and 3 young lads got out and tried to smash the windows in. They had machetes and all sorts. It was horrific. And obviously, I'm asking her a question live on air, and the next thing is you hear this shriek. And I looked at Alex Brosk, and he looked at me, and I was like,
What?
we didn't know whether she'd been attacked, whether she was okay. And obviously, we have to... Then you have to regather yourself because you're still live on air.
Yeah.
And I said, look, obviously... We don't know what's gone on there, and we're going to try and make contact with Alicia and make sure she's okay, but we're going to move on to the next segment. Let's take an ad break.
So there's that emergency, you can go ad break.
You can, yeah, but
That's final
obviously,
resort.
because the natural instinct is to say to your colleague, what do you think happened there?
Yeah.
You've got to
And
remember
put
you're
them
live
on
on
the
air.
spot.
And, your listeners are going, no, you shouldn't be talking about this because you don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
So that's where your experience has to kick in. I had a very similar incident many years ago when I reacted in a very different way. And because I was young and inexperienced, I was doing a game at Lincoln City. Mansfield, Field Mill against Preston. And Preston,
just sign
who were the local team that I was covering, scored. And the Preston directors in front of us all got up and cheered. And then one of them clutched his chest and fell to the floor. He'd obviously had a heart attack. And paramedics came in, and there's all sorts of kerfuffle underneath. And I'm sort of trying to keep half an eye on this. And I was only a young journalist in those days. And my dad, bless him, who'd come along because he was excited to be in a press box with me, wrote on a piece of paper and shoved it under because he'd heard the other journalist talking. Preston director has had a heart attack, and I just blurted it out on air.
Preston director's had a heart attack.
And then, of course, 2 seconds afterwards, I've gone, there might be people listening at home that his daughter or his wife going, what? And in those days, there were no mobile phones or, so that was a lesson learned. So that's how you pick up experience.
What would you say? What would you say is your either funniest or most embarrassing or most shocking moment on air?
Well, the Alicia Carnivas one was pretty shocking.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really beat that, can you?
There's a funny moment from many years ago. I was hosting the sports show in South Wales at Red Dragon, and we obviously rugby union's big in South Wales, so we had I think 6 or 7 reporters out at various rugby union games. And a guy called Phil Suarez, rest his soul, is no longer with us, who was my Cardiff City reporter. And he was at Walsall Stadium covering the game at the Bezcut. Anyway, I got Phil on the line, on the holds, off air, and I said, I'll be with you shortly, Phil. I just got to go to a rugby game at Pontypridd. And Phil hated rugby. And he was like, for fuck's sake, fucking rugby. I went, yeah, I know, I'll be with you in a minute. Anyway, so we went to Pontypridd, and then there's a try going in at, I don't know, Newport. I said, sorry, Phil, I've got to go to Newport because I've scored a... Fuck's sake. Yeah, I know, just hang on, be with you next. Anyway, eventually we got, round to him, and I said, let's check in at Walsall against Cardiff City. What's the latest? Phil Suarez pulled up the fader, and there's a bit of crowd noise, but there's no Phil. Hello, Phil. Are you there? Phil Suarez? Nothing. I said... Well, I'll try one more time, and then obviously Phil either can't hear us or that there's some technical issue. Phil, come in from the Bestcott. At which point somebody picked up the phone and said, "I'm just holding the phone for him, mate. He's gone for a piss." Obviously, Phil's not quite ready for us.
Obviously, Phil's not ready for us. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Good. Can I just ask you one more question? Because my mind, I love. Excellence in anything. I love when people are good at whatever it is, even if it's making rubbish bins, right? Like, I'm not a commentator. I don't know all the art of commentating. But from an observer, someone like, for example, Les Murray or yourself have been unbelievable for our game and for football in general.
Thank you.
And is there anything that my mind goes to as a player, when I saw someone that was exceptionally good that I admired, I was like, okay, how can I learn off this person? Is there anything that you picked up from someone like Les that you implement into your?
Yeah, I think by the time I arrived in Australia, I was quite an experienced broadcaster by then. So I wouldn't say that I learned anything in terms of. I don't mean any disrespect to Les, but in terms of my on-air performance from Les, because I was already pretty established. But certainly in an Australian sense, I was very green about the landscape here. And there was one thing that Les drilled home to all of us, not just me. And he used to say to us, "This is not a job; it's a mission. You're not here just to perform a task. You're here to try and lead a mission to the promised land, which was to get football where it needed to be." So I always remembered that, because obviously I didn't understand a lot of what Australian football was about when I first arrived. And to be honest, it was like watching football on the moon for me for the first couple of years. I couldn't get my head around things like finals and salary caps and no promotion, no relegation, and why everybody seemed to hate each other, and it was all about politics. It was a complete head scratcher for me, because I come from a country where the game was everything. So to come here, and I remember on the eve of my first full season here, it was the last season of the NSL, and we didn't have the rights, but I knew that the season was kicking off, and I went and bought the papers. No internet in those days, or very little, and picked up the paper and turned at the back pages, and one page in, rugby league, rugby league, rugby league, rugby union, basketball, tennis, AFL. And I was like, where is it? Yep. And there was a paragraph. I was like, oh, are you serious? This is it?
When did you sort of realise that, okay, it's becoming bigger now, and you felt more comfortable in your job rather than... Because you've just read my mind. I was literally going to ask what were the first days in the A-League like, and you've just said how green you were and how different it is. But when did you finally settle in? Was there a moment? Was there a game?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't work in the first season of the A-League. I was still at SBS for that year one. But that season, November the 16th, 2005, the game against Uruguay, that's when the whole thing changed completely. And my career changed on the back of that as well. Up until then, and actually, to be fair, it had probably changed a little bit in the build-up to that, because I don't know if you remember, but I hosted the Ashes series.
Yes.
That famous cricket series in 2005 between England and Australia. So, that changed a lot for me in terms of my career, but in terms of how football was perceived, that night in Sydney in November 2005 was the whole thing flipped on its head. And all of a sudden, we were in this accelerated growth period. It was fantastic. We had the A-League was new. Socceroos had qualified for the World Cup for the first time in 32 years. The whole thing was going gangbusters. It was amazing. It was terrific.
On that World Cup, it must feel you must feel honoured to have commentated Australia's first ever goal at a World Cup finals.
Yeah.
What was going through your head at that Australia versus Japan game? Because
don't mess it up.
Because a lot of people, I was reading the YouTube comments and they're like, listen to Simon's voice. He's so passionate. He might as well just be Aussie. And,
I am now.
Of course you are. And we'll get to that later, because I feel like you are a knight in shining armour for the Australian game, the way you speak out about things and the way you defend the game. But what was going through your head during and after that game? When did it sink in, like, I have just commentated the most historic moment so far in Australian football?
Well, I mean, I knew that was, the seismic nature of the moment even before the game kicked off, because my partner at the time, I called about an hour before the game, and of course, 2-3 o'clock in the morning in Australia.
Yes.
The time it kicked off, it was afternoon in Germany where I was. And I was speaking to her, and I could barely hear her because there was so much noise in the background. I said, "Where are you?" And she was like, "I'm at the fan site." And I was like, "How many people are there?" And she's like, "There's like 5,000 or 10,000 people here." I was like, "Okay." And that was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So then you go, right, I know how many people are watching. But so, the pressure was on. But it's funny, and I think a lot of commentators will tell you this. You can have nerves before a big game, and I do. You know, it's like playing in a cup final, I would imagine. You know, you walk out in the tunnel, you're going, oh my God, I'm about to play in a cup final. Yeah. But when the game kicks off, you're in your rhythm. It's just another game of football. So you want to get the big moments right, and I was acutely aware that if Australia scored, it was the first goal they'd ever scored in the World Cup finals. Yeah. So I wanted to get that moment right, if nothing else. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's a day that I'll always remember. That. And one quick story. I don't know if you remember when Japan scored the opening goal. There was a little bit of a nudge. It'd probably be given as a foul these days on Schwartz.
Yes.
So we made a little bit of that, and then at half time, I remember seeing coming up towards me in the stand Santo Chilaro, who was there with his Aussie top on, and I saw him. Oh, hey, Santo, how you doing? What about that foul on the... He wasn't interested in like saying hello. He just wanted to rant about the foul on Schwartzy. So,
that is, yeah, it's just your voice and that moment is like a tattoo for me. Like it's it's just
that moment in football here.
It's iconic. It's iconic.
There's a lot of people who had it as their ringtone, I think. For a while. I've heard a few of those.
That's awesome.
Is nice. Yeah. It's a very nice thing to be associated with.
So on that, you said getting into the rhythm, and once you're going, you're going.
Yeah.
Commentating is an art form. And, you know, I used to think I was good when I would commentate over the FIFA commentators while me and my brother were playing. But once you get out there and it's a game, it's a completely... There's so many things to take on board. And one video that I've seen recently that has blown my mind is Clive Tildesley and his papers.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Right.
I got them too.
Now, talk to us about... Let's first go... I've got a few questions with this. Let's go preparation for a game day. What's the basic preparation for a game day?
Basic preparation for, let's say, a run-of-the-mill A-League game, which obviously I do a lot of. I will spend a full day in preparation, working day for a game. Now, if it's an international game, or as is the case with the game I'm doing tonight, the All-Stars and Newcastle, those are two teams, particularly Newcastle, that I don't cover on a week-by-week basis. So that research takes a bit longer. Sometimes that can be 2 or even 3 days. If it's an international team like Vietnam, it can take anything up to a week. And you don't do that all in one hit. Obviously, you might do a bit when you've got a few hours, but you're aware of what's coming up. And the life of the commentator, by the time I finish this season, I've got 2 internationals coming up next week. I will have done 91 commentaries in a calendar year, along with all the other stuff that you do, radio shows, podcasts, you know, the odd article that you write here and there. So
Sorry, Tom,
you're constantly aware of what's coming up.
Can I just ask specifically, when you say you're doing the research, so obviously that entails reading and looking online and stuff, but then how are you... Are you just writing it in a book? Like how do you do
I
it?
write things down because I find that that's how it sticks better for me. I think a lot of commentators in the modern generation use laptops, and I still do for team sheets, but in terms of writing stuff down, I find that helps it stick in my head.
Scientifically proven.
Yeah. Physically write it down.
Also, Simon, like throughout the week, let's just say the game that you're doing tonight, things can change within the team. Also,
Correct.
Injuries,
Got
people
to be
falling
across
through.
all that.
So, are the teams updating you, or who's updating you on those?
Normally,
insights?
a day before the game, I will call the 2 press officers or send them a text message saying anything I need to know ahead of tomorrow.
Yep.
And, you know, we're fortunate. Obviously, we know most of the guys who work at the A-League clubs, and they will give us that information. Sometimes it can be sensitive information as well, and it's given on trust that you won't put that out publicly until, you know, the team sheets come out. So that's about relationship building.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate because we know most of the guys. But, you've got to be, as I say, prepared for everything. And if the one time you skimp on that little bit of prep, and I'll give you one very quick example. I don't remember the Adelaide goalkeeper, Stephen Hall, the young kid. He's only, I think he's 18, 19 now. He's gone over to play for Brighton now.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So I think it was about 18 months ago, there was an injury to, was it James Delianov? Or anyway, Joe Gauci was the number 1, and Delianov the number 2, and Stephen Hall was the young kid. anyway, Delianov had an injury or was unwell or something. I can't remember. So I remember the team sheets came through, and I didn't know that this young kid, Stephen Hall, was on the bench. And I looked at him and I thought, how likely? I knew he was 16. How likely is he to come on? It's not very likely. So, of course, Joe Gauci gets a shoulder injury, and on he comes. And I didn't have, apart from him being 16 and obviously coming through their youth team, I hadn't got any information on it. He became the youngest ever goalkeeper to play in National League history, and I should have had that line, and I didn't.
So that's incredible. Like,
and those are things you beat yourself up
But
on.
that's the attention to detail, right?
Player, as a
And that's
player.
that's why you had such a good career, because and it's like, in a lot of people would take that and just be like, oh well, stuff that little bit up and
That
like move
pisses
on.
me off.
But
But then as a player, imagine you knowing that player knows that.
Yeah.
He knows that. And he
Oh, yeah,
going
that's
on,
true.
watching that back, or his family will be like, oh, he didn't
fucking
say it.
Simon
He didn't
Hill!
say it. Oh, just a young lad, 16, jump on.
But yeah.
Do you, in terms of, I guess this is more maybe your co-commentator's job or like an analyst, but are you watching back games a lot or not really?
Yeah, no, I do watch. I don't watch every frame of every game because goodness me, I'll be there all night. But, I do watch games back. I used to do it a lot more when I was younger, when I was trying to sort of perfect the craft. Not that I've perfected it now, but
No, you have.
you're trying to learn and pick up on mistakes. But I also found that sometimes if you watch every moment of every game, but it can be hugely counterproductive because I'm my own worst critic. Yeah. You might have been the same as players. I don't know. If you watch a video back, you're thinking, I should have made that tackle there, or I should have tracked that run, or with a commentator, I'm thinking, I should have said that, or I shouldn't have said that, and why didn't I pick up on that? And so you've got to be self-critical, but also not too hard on yourself. It's a balance of the two.
It's so similar to, there's so many similarities to playing, which is like, for example, you said before, you do all this prep and you get ready and then you're nervous and then you get out there, but then you have to, because you've got to enter into a flow kind of a state. You can't then just be really rigid and I'm so prepared. You have to somehow relax as well and let your words just flow, right?
Exactly.
As well. Like,
And the nice thing about having this chat is being able to explain some of that, because the biggest misconception that fans have about commentators is that you watch the game like a fan. And we don't. You can't. So, this accusation that we get a lot, and we all get it. You're biased towards this thing. You're biased.
Who do they say for you?
You'd think you were cheering for Sydney FC.
Yeah, they'd say for
I was just
Sydney.
about to say that.
I knew they were going to say
Trust me,
Sydney.
you don't have time to be watching as a fan.
Yeah.
You're too busy. You're watching the play. You're trying to recognise the players instantaneously and form sentences about a game that is unfolding in 1,000 different ways between you, whilst keeping an eye on what the coaches are doing and other subs warming up and the producers in your ear, and you've got to watch your monitors and you've got to get an advert away. There is literally no time for you to sit down and go on.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works. But fans think that you watch it in the same way.
I
And
think
it's a very misunderstood craft because of that.
I think it's all of those things considered. On top of that, to add to that, a lot of people say Peter Drury puts it on a bit too much, right? I disagree. On top of all that work you do have to sort of, and I guess it comes naturally to you, but have those poetic moments.
Come up with the sound bites.
Come up with the sound bites. Build tension pre-game. You're great at doing that. When there's ever been a derby or whatever I'm watching at TV, if Simon Hill is commentating, you build that tension up. These are things that people just don't think of. Your vocabulary has to be... I think you cannot be a commentator unless you have a sublime vocabulary, because there are certain words that are just slightly better suited to the situation.
and it can't be robotic, right? Like, you can't just read.
No.
No, you can look. I prepare a few words, a few lines for the pre-game, because I think it's important to try and frame into context what you're about to watch. So I do a bit of script in pre-game, and on the occasion there might be a good line that you think of beforehand for a certain player. For example, I had one when Del Piero scored his first goal for Sydney FC. I think my line was, Del Piero, That's what they came to see. That was worth the money. That's the measure of the man, or something like that.
Nice.
And I wanted that line because I knew that was going to be replayed a lot. But you've also got to know when to use it. And that line does not work if he scores a tapping off his arse from 6 metres out. It just doesn't work. Yeah. It's not that's a Del Piero moment. It's, that's his first goal, but it came off his arse and he didn't know anything about it.
So, shut up, Harps. I need to get my line off.
But fortunately for me, he scored a beautiful 35-yard free kick, so it worked perfectly. Yep. So, you can have a line prepared, but you've also got to be aware that it might not fit the context of what you're seeing.
Is it... do you have a game that sticks in mind where you thought, I absolutely killed that? Like, that was my best performance. I know you're very self-critical.
Yeah.
But surely there was a game where you walked away and thought, I was in my flow state.
Yeah, there's probably a few, to be honest, but there's also you can never have the perfect performance.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you've played games, you've come off thinking, yeah, I did well today. But you always think back and go, yeah, but I missed that tackle, or I should have scored there. So you can't get carried away with the big moments, but equally you can't get too depressed by the down moments. There's a game that the Sydney FC Melbourne Victory semi-final in 2018, the Terry Antonis moment. I enjoyed that because those lines were unscripted, and I was literally very excited with what I was seeing because it was terrific. It was such a good game. But equally, there are moments that nobody in Australia will remember. Commentaries that I did in the UK. There was a game between Swansea and Blackpool in 1995. Where I was stood on a rickety gantry at the old Vetch Field, a game that ended 4-4, and Blackpool scored twice in the last minute to equalise. And, those things stick in my mind. I called an Alan Shearer goal for Blackburn.
Wow.
Where he found space impossibly, and I said, you can't give him an inch because he takes a mile.
Yeah.
And, I was like, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
That was just off the top of your head.
That's good. Yeah, that was all right. That was good today.
That was the year they won the league.
No, it was the year before they won the league. Yeah, but there are all those little sort of moments that mean nothing to people here because in their head, you're associated with Uruguay, Japan, World Cup, and I get all that. Yeah. But for me, my career spans a lot bigger than just those games.
I feel like you've lived 2 lifetimes in the commentary world because you did so much in the UK. And then you've done international tournaments, and now you're known as the guy in Australia, and it's just
best job in the world.
What's funny? I was going to write this down, but I've just remembered it. When I was 15, everyone used to ask me, "What do you want to be when you're older?" And I always said commentator. I always wanted to be a commentator. And they go, "Cool. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" You know those generic questions they ask you at school. And I said, by 21, I'll be commentating in London. Little did I fucking know how much hard work it is. And today is the perfect example of the preparation that goes in. I just thought because at my age I had a decent vocabulary and I was, I was a bit bubbly Yeah. And that's why I'm even glad to be doing something remote, very sort of in a different direction, but podcasting, asking questions, because it is similar in some sense.
If you can do a job you love, you never work a day in your life.
That's it. On the A-League, or in Australia in general, what is the most unique, I guess, moment or story you've had that nobody knows about? Whether it was just something weird that happened while you were recording or something crazy that no one knows about. Is there a specific moment or story where you're going to tell people for ages?
Goodness me. There's so many. I guess that, for us, or for me, one of the great joys of the job, and it doesn't happen so much these days because things have changed in the media world, but, travelling overseas with the Socceroos to weird and wonderful destinations that I would never otherwise have gone to. Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Vietnam, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. We've been literally all over the world. But I guess there's one story that stands out, and at the time it was it's quite scary in a way. We in 2012 we flew to Lebanon for a friendly, and then 4 days later we were flipping over to Jordan for the World Cup qualifier, which is a game that Australia lost, by the way.
Yeah.
So we landed in Lebanon, and to be honest, I was a bit dubious about going because Beirut at the time, the Syrian war had just kicked off, which was literally over the border.
Yep.
And they were playing this friendly in Beirut. Anyway, we landed, and Beirut was terrific. The Christian part of Beirut is very westernized, nightclubs, cafes, beautiful. And then you drive through the Green Line, and you have the Muslim side, which is, very stark contrast. Anyway, the day before the game, the venue got moved, apparently through a grass virus at the Camille Chamoun Stadium.
That sounds about Lebanese.
We later found out that it was because there were Al-Qaeda operatives in the area, and it was moved to the port city of Sidon, which is a stadium that literally backs out onto the Mediterranean Sea, which made it very safe. So we drove down from Beirut in a taxi, and all the way. And these are the really fascinating moments of your career that have nothing to do with football, really. But you feel as though you've lived because you've experienced these moments. And we were driving down. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Lebanon. Are you Lebanese heritage?
I'm half Lebanese.
Yeah. So Lebanon, as you will know, mountains.
Yep.
On the other side is Syria, mountains, and then steep drop down a valley, and then it's the Mediterranean Sea. That's basically the entire country. So we're driving in this taxi south from Beirut to Sidon, and we're looking up on the hills, and there are burnt out houses, burnt out cars. And I said to the taxi driver, what happened here? Alawites, 5 years ago, all gone. Oh, okay. And we go on another 15, 20 kilometres, there'd be another burnt out village, and I'd say, what about this one? Druze, 10 years ago, all gone. Wow. Anyway, we get to about 40 minutes outside Sidon, and the taxi driver took a message through his radio, and he said, nothing to worry about, gentlemen. We take small diversion. Al-Qaeda is in the area, so we have to...
Nothing to worry about. One of the world's most dangerous terrorist groups in the way. We'll just take a left.
So, and we're Australians... sitting ducks really in a car. Anyway, we get to the stadium in Sidon, and the entire stadium is ringed with tanks, back to almost like parked up against each other. And there's only one sliver of an opening for anybody to get through. So we started to walk through, and the colonel or the general, whatever he was on the gate. He was very nice. Hello, gentlemen, welcome. And I said, are we okay? Are we safe? And he went, my friend, look around you. You are perfectly safe. So we did that game, which was an incredible experience because of all those things. And then the day after, we flew to Jordan. And on the day of the game, we went and lay in the Dead Sea, with all the salt. And we're flat on our backs, reading the newspaper with Jerusalem on that side, a war going on the other side. And then we were going off to do the football. Yeah, that ain't bad, is it? Even though it was a bit scary. Those are a journalist said to me many years ago when I was complaining about something when we were overseas. I was actually in Burkina Faso doing the African Cup of Nations, and the technology was terrible over there, and I was complaining about it. And I said, what the hell are we doing here? And this guy said, you're collecting stories for your old age. And he was right. Yeah.
Well, you hear all those stories from journalists, right? Like the bravery of journalists.
Burkina Faso.
I don't know whether we were brave.
Well, I was gonna ask you. Is that the let's say scaredest that you've ever been in your journalistic career?
No. Brazil World Cup 2014. We went on a tour of one of the favelas with the Green and Gold Army to do a story on the Aussie fans over there, and we got caught up in a shootout between one of the local drug gangs and the Rio militia. We'd wandered into an area that obviously we shouldn't have been in. We didn't know. We had a tour guide with us, and all of a sudden we hear this, the gunfire, and it was a bit sort of down below, and we're having a look over, and this lady leans out the window and says in Portuguese, "Get your fucking heads down." So, okay. So we're all crouched down, And I do a piece to camera thinking this is all very exciting, Well, we're in the middle of something here. We don't quite know what's going on. Anyway, it stopped after a couple of minutes and, okay, we can walk on. And we walked halfway down the mountainside and then all of a sudden the militia arrived screaming at us and guns pointed. And we were like, holy fuck, what the fuck is going on here? They pinned us all up against the wall because they didn't know who we were. And they didn't know whether we were part of this gang, which obviously we weren't because we were, all in football tops. You got to lift your shirts because they wanted to see whether you were armed or not. So even the girls who were with us, you got to lift your tops up. So they were checking, okay. And then they herded us into this cake shop and kept us there for 45 minutes with all this gunfire going on outside. And I said to the tour guide, I said, are we okay? Are we going to survive this? And he said, I think it will be okay. And I said, are we in here for our protection? And he said, to be honest, I think they're using us as human shields because if the drug gangs shoot tourists, they get longer sentences.
Oh, wow.
So they're using us as protection.
That's not what you want to
Then you said, get me back to Al-Qaeda.
yeah. Nothing to worry about, my friend.
Get me back to fucking Lebanon.
There's, there's all those when you go to these places, similar Tajikistan, there was an Islamic insurgency the day that we arrived.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
There was a unrest on the streets. There was an insurgency, fighting against the government. And there's all that happens, I wouldn't say regularly, but that's...
Simon,
you go to these places.
Is Tajikistan the one that's ruled by a dictator and they have the
I
gold?
think a lot of them are ruled by
The one in Central Asia.
Oh, I think that's Turkmenistan.
Turkmenistan. Yes, sorry.
But Tajikistan, a lot of those places are powder kegs because they've got a mix of Muslim and non-Muslim, and there's tension.
Yeah.
We arrived in Tajikistan and we were told that there'd been a local edict by the non-Islamic head of state that every male over 16 had to shave their beard. And I think that was a way of them, saying to the insurgents, you'll do as you're told. But we just landed. Of course, I've got a beard. And I'm like, am I going to be all right? Nah, you'll be all right. You're a tourist. Oh, okay.
I think that's your best commentary line. Are we going to be okay here? That might have
There's been a few of those moments.
That should have been the title of your book.
Is that footage available of you doing the bit in the favela?
Yes, it's still available. I think I've got it on Facebook somewhere.
Yeah.
Gotta find it for the
find that.
snippet.
We got to
What favela was it? Do you remember?
Rocinha.
Rocinha, yeah.
Yeah, one of the most, I think it's the most famous one, the biggest one.
Yeah.
Rashid and I went.
Yeah.
And
It's quite an experience, huh?
And the favelas, I love that type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
You love hiding in cake shops?
We had a good time. It was good fun.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, man.
I was thinking it was going to be something like, and then after the game, Del Piero said, nice commentary.
Yeah. And then when you do your journalist degree and they don't teach you, they don't tell you to expect that.
No, I mean, if I'd wanted to be a war correspondent, I would have gone and done that. But that's just particularly when you're playing in Asia, you're dealing with so many different cultures, so many different areas of the world. You go to Japan and it's pretty much Western, apart from the language and the food, and then you go to places like Saudi or Kuwait and. It's completely different.
What was the
Kuwait's
biggest culture shock
dry.
in terms of where you went?
Probably Saudi.
Yeah.
It's the only place I've been refused entry into a lift because the gentleman had his wife with him, so they didn't want us in the lift.
Do you know what's
The only
crazy?
place where they've checked the length of the shorts before you go out and go and have a walk.
It's in Saudi has always been like that, but from my knowledge now, they are trying to loosen those sort of how stringent they are because they're building a mega city there in the middle of the desert, and
Is that the Neom?
the whatever it's called, and then you're looking at they're allowing celebrities to do what they want. Ronaldo and his wife can do what they want. Now they're bringing in all these foreign players or whatever. So Saudi's always been like that, but I think they're trying to rival Dubai in terms of. Anyway, that's another topic. But wow, I was not expecting that. Yeah. I'm fully blown away. As soon as I get home, Max, Simon told us that he was in a shootout in the favelas. All he wanted to do was fucking say Cahill goal. That's absolutely crazy.
All part of life's rich tapestry.
Oh,
I haven't even told the African Cup of Nations stories, but that's too long.
Oh, wow.
Nah, see,
My
that
God.
would have been... Is there any countries you haven't been?
Oh, there's plenty of countries I've not been to, but I've covered football on every continent on Earth. That's the
incredible.
beauty of the
Yeah,
job.
wow.
What were you dealing with in Burkina Faso in terms of technology? Like, what was...
You know, this was pre-mobile phones, so we had the bricks. You remember the old bricks?
Yeah.
In the late 90s that weighed
wow.
about 8 tons. Yeah. And what we had to do, I was with the BBC there, and we were staying in the capital city, which is called Ouagadougou. That's not a joke, by the way. That's what it's called.
I've seen YouTube videos on it.
And to get stuff back to London in those days, you had to book satellite space. So there was no feeding of things via email or ISDN line or, just sending automatically as they do today. So our studio engineer, a guy called David Hay, who was the Lion, you're collecting stories for your old age, that was him. Yeah. He set up this satellite equipment on the top of the roof of the hotel, which was literally, 8 floors up. And he shinned up a drain pipe to get up there and because he needed the best possible signal to catch this satellite that was whizzing past the Earth every, 2 minutes or whatever it was. And all in, like 90-degree heat.
Yeah.
Because it was pretty damned hot. And we had another journey for the semi-final. So the second city was called Bobo Dioulasso, which was an 8-hour drive away by desert dirt track. So we went in a taxi and it was pretty hairy because it's in the dead of night as well. Very quickly. So when we're coming back, the game was Burkina Faso against Democratic Republic of Congo, which was a commentary challenge, by the way. Especially as the Burkina players had all dyed their hair yellow, which made it very tricky. So, and at the end of the game, Burkina Faso, the host, lost, and the fans rioted, tear gas. We got tear gassed, and we're stumbling around trying to find our way to the taxi. We eventually got back to our guy, and he was eager to get out of there because things were a little bit harem-scarum. So he put his foot down. We're off into the desert, and 11 o'clock at night, completely pitch black, no roads, no street lights, nothing, just the moon and the car, basically. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, he pulled over and said something in French, and I don't speak much French, but one of the guys with us does. And he said, "I don't believe it." And I said, "What?" He said he's got to go and buy some onions for his mother.
He's what? Wait, he pulled over in the middle of the desert to say, fuck the onions.
I've got to get some onions for my mother. And I went,
Surely that's a misunderstanding. Surely he's understood the
Wonder what
French
that
wrong.
means in
anyway,
French.
off he went.
he say that?
Wandered into the middle of the night, and I remember saying to my mate, "What if he don't come back? What we could? Where the fuck are we?"
Anyway, okay.
The best part of the story is 10 minutes later, back he came, bag of onions. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
I don't know where he got them from.
That's a fucking human GPS. I need him in my back seat rather than Apple Maps.
Oh my God.
Just knowing where to go. Just
Well, I assume that he knew that there was a little settlement there, and I would imagine that I don't know what the trade is in Burkina Faso, but he probably just went and knocked on a door and said, "Do you have any onions?" Gave him some money, and yeah,
what year is this again?
98.
Man, this is like these are the stories I want, but I don't want to go through those
Well,
experiences.
I was gonna say, yeah. And I was going to say, I'm assuming these are all in your book.
Yes, they're all in the book.
Go get the book.
Go get the book.
Go get the
Just
book.
I'm
God on
gonna
a
go
stick.
get it.
New Holland books.
Yes, go get the book. Okay, I got a few more, and then we can. I'm more than satisfied.
Sorry, people are probably going to be nodding off by now.
No. This is. I can comfortably say that they are the best stories I think I've done over 100 podcast episodes. They are the best stories I've ever heard. Did any players or coaches or clubs give you a hard time?
Oh God, yeah.
But is there one you can say that's maybe so long in the past that you're not going to get in trouble for? Or
So there's when I was at BBC Radio Lancashire in one of the early parts of my career, we were based out of Blackburn, and their big rivals, Blackburn Rovers, were Burnley. Now, Burnley had a persecution complex. Blackburn were the big club at the time. Jack Walker, Kenny Dalglish, Alan Shearer, Chris Sutton, Tim Flowers, Tim Sherwood. You know, they were the dominant force in the region that we covered. And Burnley were down in the second or even third division, and they hated each other. So the fact that we were based in Blackburn meant that Burnley thought we were all Blackburn Rovers fans, which wasn't true. As you know, I'm a City fan. I didn't care for either team. So, but they had it in their heads that we were all Blackburn plants. So when we go down to interview them, they were tetchy at best. And the manager at the time of Burnley was a guy called Jimmy Mullen, who was a gruff Geordie and liked to drink, I think, as well, Jimmy.
that's a little bit.
Anyway, so this one game they played was away at Bradford City at Valley Parade, and I was commentating the game. Now, the night before, we had a preview show with a Welsh international winger called Leighton James. Don't know if you have heard of him. He died very recently, actually, but he used to play for Burnley, and he was very passionate still about Burnley. And this particular season, they played, I think, 8 away games, hadn't won any of them. And Leighton had apparently, on the Friday night, I didn't know, I was out in the pub, and there was no internet or Twitter or anything. So Leighton had smashed Burnley, saying at set pieces, they're poor defensively and they create nothing from set pieces at the other end. That's why they're not winning away from home. So, of course, what happened? The day after, they go and win 1-0 at Bradford and they score from a set piece. I didn't know. I wandered into the press conference, and Jimmy Mullen, I was a little bit late. Jimmy Mullen was already into his first answer, and he looked up and saw me and he said, "And as for you Radio Lancashire cunt, I bet you think that we won today because of Leighton fucking James." I was just like, sorry? So
Get me back to Al-Qaeda.
yeah. But it's, I got on fine with Jimmy after that. But there are plenty of little blowouts because football's an emotional game.
Oh, yeah.
And, we can be a lightning rod for that. And coaches think you're against them or that you're for them or you don't like their club or you don't like this player. And it's all nonsense.
Yeah.
This is crazy because all I do is spend my time listening to podcasts of people saying these type of stories, and to get one right here in the flesh is amazing. That's incredible. Yeah. Have you had any here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mostly coaches, I'm assuming.
Yeah. To be honest, the coaches generally aren't too bad. There's been one or two. I remember Ernie Merrick in the early years had a go at me for not promoting the game in the right way. And I was like,
right.
I ain't my job, mate. I just call the games.
In what do you know what he meant by that?
I think he was irritated. I think I'd probably had a crack at victory for some reason or another.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And he wasn't particularly happy about it. But again, I get on fine with Ernie. No problems. It happens. The biggest issues, particularly in the modern day, come from the suits. The
suits.
People you don't know.
Yeah, fucking suits.
They're the issue because they don't want to be scrutinised. Yeah. It's a big problem in this country because they need to be held to account. Yeah, because most of them are not doing a very good job.
Well, I mean, I could have. There's so many directions we can go from that statement.
Well, I think because we have criticised certain things about obviously our football landscape a little bit.
We cop it,
and everyone's just like, oh yeah, great, helping the game, talking about, but it's
part of the
areas you can improve,
people have lost sight of what journalism is about. Yes, it's to cover the game, but it's to cover the game good, bad, or indifferent. The old journalistic motto is without fear or favour. So you're not for or against anybody. And you're not scared of holding people to account. And to be honest, one of the problems in our game at the moment is that people have not been held to account enough. So they've been able to get away with making very poor decisions, which is maybe one of the reasons why we're in the state we're in at the moment.
I think that's our idea with the pod, is to try and, we've all been in football and
be honest.
The idea is to, get the best out of it.
I think...
Oh, sorry. You go.
I just think that, even though I wouldn't consider us journalists, we do offer a similar sort of, product in that we are like Simon said, talking about the game, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly. But one thing that really grinds my gears, and it would happen with you as well, is people just, they don't know you personally. They don't know what you've given to the game. So when that Ernie Merrick thing, when you heard that, imagine hearing that now as Simon Hill. You haven't
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, Ernie has given a lot longer service to Australian football than I have.
Yes, fair.
So,
fair.
you can't be too prissy about it. If you dish it out, you've got to be able to cop it as
That's
well.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with people calling me up and saying, you got that wrong, or I don't agree with that. I have a problem with people who are abusive. And that's my point. But that's social media, largely.
My point is that they're not just going to... So people always say, they say it to me, why do you respond to all the comments? And I'm like, watch carefully. I respond to the one saying, get these fucking flogs off the podcast. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. I'm like, you're going to tell that to me? He's got over 100 games in the A-League. He's played all over the world. They've both got academies. You're going to say to us, we're not, helping Australian football? What are you talking about? Yeah. But if you disagree...
One thing that I do struggle with, I think it gets a bit different when you're doing something like a podcast. I struggle when someone asks me, for example, someone asked me the other day, who was the most overrated player that you ever played with? I really struggle to criticise players in a situation where I can see it as only benefiting myself. Does that make sense? As opposed to providing feedback or critiquing something to improve it. You're
not a pundit.
That's an unfair question because you should respect if you've made it to the level that you guys have played at, then you're half decent. So you should have respect for people in the same way that I never criticise other commentators. Never. That's even like anybody else. I have commentators I like and maybe some that I'm less fond of, but I will never criticise them because I know what it takes to do the job. So you've got to be respectful of that.
Who is your favourite? Who do you look up to?
When I was younger, there was a radio commentator in England called Brian Butler. A radio commentator who was just fantastic. He had the most beautiful chocolatey voice with a slight hint of West Country burr. So everything was, the R's were just a little bit extended. And very deep voice. He is terrific. Yeah, so he was my idol.
How much research on commentators and journalists do you do in terms of pulling from other codes and just looking at skills and things that you can...
Well, I don't watch the other codes, to be brutally honest, because obviously growing up in England, there was no AFL. And rugby league is only a sort of a niche game, really, in the UK. So I didn't watch those games. I still don't. I very much liked Richie Benaud's laconic, laid-back style with just the odd acerbic little comments. It was a great one during the Ashes series 2005. England was struggling to cope with Shane Warne. I don't know if you remember, they created this machine called Merlin, which replicated Shane Warne's googlies and all his rhinos and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, Simon Hughes, who was the bowlologist, as they called him, did this 5-minute brilliant feature explaining how it worked and how they were trying to conquer Shane Warne, and they cut back to Richie Benaud with a wide shot of the field, and he just left it long enough with a pregnant pause, and then he went, but does it have a brain?
They're the best type of comment, those little moments.
Great.
Do you have a favourite commentator?
Careful here, Rush.
Simon Hill.
Besides
honestly,
besides Simon.
I've got mine coming into this.
You know what's crazy is I can't even explain what I mean here very well, but his voice is so ingrained. It's so ingrained that I don't even associate it with you. I associate it with watching the game. If that's
nice to hear.
That's a good thing.
Do you know what I mean?
That's a compliment. Yeah.
It's almost like that's the voice of the game, not Simon.
Well, no, that's nice. I'll take that.
You got to take that, Simon. What about you, Rash? Gav?
I don't know his name, but it used to be on ESPN years back.
It would have been...
He had the Italian voice, and he used to do all the...
Italian voice? What was he? Well, Italian...
With a slight accent.
Oh, he's got an accent.
And he would do it in...
Marcotti? Gab Marcotti?
It might be. And
he's the only Italian I can think
of. I remember just waking up with my mate, and we'd watch Serie A, and he would do the games, and it was unbelievable.
I'm trying to think who that was.
And also just thinking about it is just how much a commentator can change the game when you are watching it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Coming into this, that's exactly what I was thinking is when you're watching a game and you listen to the commentator, how much it can get you involved. And especially growing up in Argentina, watching all the games being commentated in Spanish and the difference.
they're passionate.
Oh, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah, because you can almost
It gives you
turn a
that
game.
Goosebumps, you know?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the Socceroos and the 2005 against Uruguay, I was getting goosebumps just sitting here and feeling that and just the World
It brings
Cup.
back nice memories. Yeah.
I would say, no one asked, but I'm going to say anyway.
Who's your favourite commentator?
Thanks, Simon. Motson and Champion, I would say.
I'm
They're
a
just
John Champion fan.
He is just.
Yeah.
And, Martin Tyler's been copping it lately because a lot of, I hate basing my word on Twitter, but I'm on Twitter. Okay?
A lot.
A lot. And a lot of people are saying, God, Martin Tyler's commentating again. Martin Tyler's a legend. I just think that he's not at his, what you would call peak. But as for now, Drury, you can't beat Drury.
I love those things that people criticizing them, saying that he's
Drury.
overdoing it, but
Yeah.
I love him.
I just think
love
it's
him,
just at the end of the day, sports is entertainment, and if you're going to add to it like you can, and I don't think it sounds forced from him.
You need, in football, you need a mix of styles.
Yes.
And Peter has one style. You love it or you hate it. John Champion has a very different style. Now, personally, I'm a fan of John Champion. I've worked with both, by the way, both John and Peter at ITV and the BBC, and they're great guys. For me, John's economy of words is terrific. He daubs little on the canvas, little splotches on the canvas, whereas Pete paints a masterpiece. And, you can like or loathe one or the other, but I think it's good to have a mix of styles.
Did you ever meet Louis Theroux?
No, he's not a football commentator.
I know. But I love
Was he at the BBC though?
He's at the BBC, yeah.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
How important is it? I'm not going to obviously get you to name names, but how important is it to have a good chemistry with your co-commentator?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. And, obviously experience is an assistant with that. And the more that you work with a guy, the more you sort of bounce off each other, or almost instinctively when the other wants to come in. I work a lot, obviously, with Andy Harper. In the past, I've worked a lot with Robbie Slater. Good relationships with both. And you do become like an old husband and wife type pairing.
You and Harps?
You know each other. You know each other. The other thing that I would say, and this is just a practical thing for me, and this is one of the reasons why I love to work with what we call lip ribbons, which are microphones like these, but with the thing and case at the top. And the reason I prefer to work with those rather than the headsets, which a lot of modern commentators work with, is that you can, when you stop speaking, you can physically go. And then your co-commentator knows that he's okay to come in. Now, with headsets, if you don't know when the other person's going to speak.
Is there a cough button?
There's a cough button.
There's a cough button. I always wanted to know if there was a cough button.
A cough button and a talk back button to the studio. Yeah.
I love
So
it.
if I see somebody in the stands who's famous, Rashid Bahazi's in the stand. He's sat just below us. So, they'll turn the cameras around and point.
Was that how it...
Sometimes, yeah.
Tricks of the trade.
Rashid's next to Fayed having a meal.
Yeah, Rashid's having a meal next to Fahid. What would you... I don't even know if this is a proper question, but what would you say is your favourite place to commentate in terms of how you're looked after, the comfort, the technology?
Oh, that's a good one. Most of the A-League stadiums these days are pretty good in terms of commentary facilities. Amy Park used to be probably the best, but that's changed a little bit because they've reconstructed certain areas of the stand that we're in. So we're in a different place now, and the view is not quite as good. It's slightly obstructed, which is unfortunate. High Marsh, I love going to. Cooper Stadium.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because it's a proper football ground.
It is.
It's a rectangle. The fans are right on top of it.
Yeah.
And they're pretty passionate, the Adelaide bunch. And you always know because when there's a controversial decision, 100 of them turn around to us and go,
Oh, really?
Fucking talk
And
about it.
if we give them, nah, mate, it wasn't. They'll give it to us.
Well, has VAR changed a lot for you guys?
God, don't get me started.
What do you feel about VAR, Simon?
3 words. No. 4. Get rid of it.
Yeah, all right.
Premier League, do the right thing. I know they're voting on it, and I know they won't.
A-League,
to get
do
rid
the
of
right
it?
thing.
Yeah, hey, yeah,
Really?
yeah. Man, listen. I didn't think it was that much of an issue till I went to the most important game of my life. Okay? Chelsea versus Arsenal at the Bridge. You know how much I hate Arsenal. You know how much I love Chelsea. Celebrating until my neck veins nearly bursted, and then watching VAR overturn that. Could you imagine how sick I was?
Yeah, that's
I just wanted to go straight back to Melbourne. What's the fucking point of being here?
it's terrible. Yeah.
That's when I realised, oh, wow,
Yeah.
this is bad. And then I went to Spurs City when City lost 2-0 at the new stadium. And there was a VAR decision in that. And it was either that or the Leipzig game, the Champions League game. And the Spurs fans, that many, they're loud. And when that VAR decision came up, people were fucking fuming. I know it's like beating a dead horse, but it literally, you're not going to understand unless you're a match-going fan and
What do players think about it?
Well, I was going
you
to
in
say,
favour or
I hate it. I hate it. Even if I would rather have a bad call, I'd rather the game not have it and cop a few bad calls and wrong calls
That's
here
my feeling as well.
than to just,
First
get
thought
everything
to me,
right. Well, it's not even still right.
When you say VAR, is the Diego Maradona hand of God? That's the first
Of course you think
When
that.
it's VAR, it's that. It comes from
But maybe it comes back to the thing that you said, like suits making decisions, and because I wonder, like, which football person is making, like, is it a football person making these decisions? Because I feel like as fans, no one's asking for that. No one wants it.
I think you'll find ultimately, it's not happening at the moment, but ultimately all that stuff will be sponsored, and that's what it's about.
Yeah,
It's
right.
about money. There's
even
a natural break in the game with VAR, so you can stick a sponsor's logo over it.
I didn't even think of that. The way I'd have it is, I don't mind automated offsides because it'll be quick. So, they said VAR was going to be quick, so you never know. Goal line technology, that's fine.
Yeah, goalie, that's fine.
Yeah, I've got no issue with that either.
Clear and obvious. Why the fuck are you taking 10 minutes?
Because this is always the thin end of the wedge with VAR. Once you brought it in, clear and obvious was never going to be a thing.
Never.
Because clear and obvious to me is not clear and obvious to you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it was always going to creep further into the game. My fear is at some point we're going to end up having VAR for throw-ins.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Because every aspect of the game now
Snowballs,
can be covered by so many different camera angles. Yeah. You're going to have games that are going to go on for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
just on
against
that. Even like, do you remember why Golden Goal got taken away? Like, I loved Golden Goal as a fan
I don't know why they took that away. Yeah.
because these things
Yeah, I love
change, and I'm
playing.
like, why do they change when everyone's loving it and enjoying it?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
makes
it's like
them
with the
change?
kids. You go last
I
goal
don't know
wins.
whether they consult the fans, do they?
Well, they definitely don't fucking consult the fans. You know what it is, Rash? It is this constant obsession of evolving. That's what I think it is. And I think over time, like, did they need to change the Champions League format? No. Are they? Yes.
Even the second leg of the A-League.
That's it. Now, away goals don't count in Europe as well.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Somebody said to me that in the first 100 years of football's existence, there were only, I think it was 12 or 13 rule changes. And since then, we've had like 80, 90.
yeah.
So they're constantly tinkering, even with interpretations of existing rules.
Yep.
And as commentators as well as, I'm sure it must be difficult for referees, but even as commentators, we're not always across every single minute little instruction that the AFC or the A-League has given their referees. So, you can be interpreting a decision on the basis of your own knowledge, but not be quite up to date, which makes what you're saying completely wrong.
Yeah, this is so interesting. We did a meeting at Victory, start of, I can't remember what year it was, but before the season. And the referees came in and explained all the rules to us. And there was, every single player in there was like, fuck, I don't even know the rules of football.
Especially his players.
Yeah,
It's
that's like,
well,
what?
The
Where
big
did
one,
this rule
the
come
big
from?
one for me used to be attacker's advantage or striker's advantage with the offside thing, or benefit of the doubt, I think they would say.
Well, that's about to change. Have you seen Arsene Wenger's new?
Yes.
Which I think goes too far the
Yeah.
other way.
No,
but
well,
anyway.
I haven't.
So basically, if you're at the moment, if your knee is a quarter of a centimetre in front, you're offside. Wenger's going to change it.
Oh, the other
that
way.
It's the other way, that if your back leg, if your back big toe is level with the last
I have seen
defender,
that.
you're onside.
Yeah.
Now that gives a difference of possibly up to 2 metres.
Yeah.
I think that's too much the other way. But anyway,
Wenger's tried to bring in a few things.
yeah, he's turned into the mad professor.
Yeah,
hasn't he?
he has. Because that's not the only thing he tried to change. He tried to bring in a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I guess it would be, obviously it's hard for referees, but for a commentator, like you were saying, you don't know the minor changes that they make. So you might say something and then some nerd on Twitter might say, no, well, they changed that in October. If you read the fucking...
The issue I find these days is, I grew up and I was football mad as a kid. And I grew up reading football annuals about footballers and had posters of my favourite footballer on the wall. I swear to God, this generation, they go to bed with the laws of the game because they know everything about every rule, and yet they barely recognise any of the players. It's almost a complete reversal. The refs now are bigger stars than the footballers. How has that happened? How have we made them the centre of this universe? I don't know about you, but I don't go to a game of football to watch a referee looking into a little screen going, go back one frame, go the other way. Yeah. Hang on, what? Yeah, okay. Well, okay, can we go back to the previous phase of play? Oh, my God. Get on with the game.
Yeah,
Can I watch the footballers?
The beauty of football is how free-flowing it is.
But I'm going to assume that even the refs don't want to. I would assume they don't want to.
I don't think a lot of the referees do want it.
Yeah.
I think they would be quite happy to go back to the way things were, but look, I don't think it's going to happen.
It's not.
It's here to stay, so they've got to try and make it the best that they possibly can. At the moment, I think we're a long way off that.
Howard Webb, do the right thing. Get rid of it.
Well, it's the clubs.
Yeah. Well,
Not
yeah.
Howard Webb.
Well, yes, you're right.
again.
The clubs actually are deciding, but there's been a lot of that whole referees association. That's like you said, they're the stars of the show now. And look, obviously, I'm not condoning. Obviously, refs, they need to calm down with the abuse on refs. Like that one with I think it was Anthony Taylor in the airport. Too far.
Disgraceful.
Come on. Okay.
Well, but I put a tweet out the other day, and I'm on Twitter now too.
Yes, welcome.
Saying that we've thrown refs under the bus even further now because you bring in this thing where everyone can see the process, but then you leave subjectivity in there.
Correct.
Yep. So it's a microscope.
The rules always had a lot that was left open to the interpretation of the referee, and those rules are still in place in large part. Yeah. But now we have created a zero-sum game with VAR, where the fans now expect once it goes upstairs with all the technology that they're going to get it right.
Yeah.
The problem is, what is right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the rules are not black and white. That's why I'm with you on goal line technology. Is it in? Is it out? That's fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
But is that a handball? Is his arm moving away? Is it a natural silhouette? Is it distance from the... Oh, please.
Yeah.
The natural
Just
silhouette
leave
of a
it to the
handball.
ref.
That rule, my gosh. I'm like, if your arm's there, it's natural. In my head,
Exactly.
If you have an arm,
if you have an arm and
Yeah.
it's there, it's natural.
Maybe we should just have players playing with their hands tied behind their back.
yeah. Because if you watch Thiago Silva, one of the best defenders ever, currently he's adapted his game to where, or even Chalobah, all I watch is Chelsea. Every single time, they just know.
Yeah.
They know, and it's like, okay, but that changes your balance. That changes how you approach the attacker. That changes how efficient you are in winning the ball because, you've got more whatever.
And I would almost argue that if your hand gets hit in this position, that's not natural.
Well, there you fucking go.
Right.
There you go.
It's not a natural position for you to be in, is it?
Watch him run up to slide tackle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's fucking stupid.
Hands behind your back.
Last thing, and the question that has been popping up, and again, we can get rid of it if you want, no problems. But the AFL being a mafia, in the sense that is it known that they are trying to stifle the growth of football in this country? Or is that just a myth?
I don't know whether what they're trying to do is protect their own code.
Yeah.
And that's completely understandable. Because where is Aussie rules going? It's going nowhere. It's not going to Europe. It's not going to Asia. It's not going to South America. So its heartland is here. So it protects its heartland. Rugby league's a bit the same.
Yeah.
All right, it's played in the UK and a little bit in New Zealand. But essentially the heartlands of those two sports are in Australia. It is in their interests for their sports not just to survive here, but to thrive here.
Fair enough.
Now, football is the biggest threat to that because we're a global game and they know the size of football internationally. So do they run interference from time to time? Yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. Almost definitely. Will they give us any potential advantage if they can possibly help it? Of course they won't, because we're seen as the biggest competition. But we, there's an element of it, but we've got to be a lot better at what we do. Our people have got to be much more football savvy, and instead of reaching out to constantly look for mainstream approval. Yep. We've got to look after our own people. It's got to be a football-first organisation, which they keep saying that they are.
Yeah.
They've got to prove it.
Because I feel like there's this constant passing of the buck of, it's the AFL's fault and it's the government's fault and it's this and it's that.
They don't help us.
They don't help us, right? Who would you say is the key players that can potentially push the game forward? Obviously, fans are a big part of that. That's a no-brainer, but...
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, football supporters. We need a more united game. At the moment, we're like crabs in a bucket. We fight against each other all the time. A-League clubs and FA and member federations, MPL clubs and member federations. Everybody's at each other's throats. Nobody respects anybody else. Nobody will work together. And until we have that unified approach, an overall football plan that everybody gets on board with, whether they agree with all of it or not, and rows in the same direction, we'll continue to have the sort of problems that we have at the moment. I went on record the other day as saying I think some really good PR for the A-League would be to come out and publicly support the National Second Division. They don't have to say we're going to have promotion relegation tomorrow. But you can come out and as a show of solidarity and say, hey, good luck to you guys, make this work, and if 5 years down the line, we'll have a look at it. That costs nothing. But at the moment, silence. Yeah. And, so you get this bitching between the two, enmity between FA and APL, member feds doing their own thing because turkeys don't vote for Christmas, all that sort of stuff.
I need to not retract a statement, but I need to say I shouldn't have went as hard as I said when these are the three enemies of progress in the country for football, and people got on me for it. I still stand by my statement because I said, look, newsflash, we do a podcast and sometimes we need snippets. So sometimes I'm going to put a little bit of sauce on it.
Peter Jury.
Yes, and then sometimes I'm going to piss people off. It's just what happens. But I said the main enemies of Australian football progress are the AFL, the government funding, and the police. While some people mostly agreed with me, they're like, I copped it from all angles. And I'm like, police? Why don't you try fucking behaving? How's that sound? I was like, okay, cool. Government, they gave this and that. Oh, AFL, what the fuck did we do? Blah, blah, blah. Guys, yes, fair enough. Simon makes great points. They're protecting their code. I didn't even factor that in. I was just so passionate about who's fucking with us over here. Oh, you guys are? You're on the enemy list. You guys are? You're on the enemy list. And I got to be passionate, but I think the protecting the code part is what I missed in that argument because, of course, like Simon said, they tried to do it in China, AFL. Guess what? Nobody fucking cared. So they've got to obviously make the game as big as they can here. And fair play to them. They might be a bit dirty at times, but they do well at protecting the game. I don't know who I said, who we were arguing with. Maybe it was you. AFL will always be number one, at least for the next.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
It's not what I want.
It doesn't matter who's number one or who's number 2 or 3 or 4. All we need to do as a game is fulfill our potential.
Yeah, fair
The
enough.
rest will take care of itself. Whether we're number 1, number 2, 3,
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
We should not be measuring ourselves by what the other codes do. They're nothing to do with us, and we're nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
We've just got to fulfill the potential that we have for the game in this country. And you look at 78,000 people watching Newcastle and Spurs the other night. Now, not all of them are dyed-in-the-wool football fans, but some of them will be who just don't go and watch either A-League or NPL games.
How do you feel about that? Because I saw a tweet of yours which said the Americanization. Yeah.
It's frustrating. Well, that was more to do with the penalties at the end. But
Yeah, okay.
It's frustrating that so many people will turn up to watch what is effectively a glorified kick around, but they won't go and watch the competitive games in the A-League around the corner. But, that's not on them. That's on us as a sport to make it attractive for them to feel compelled to want to come. And we haven't done that well enough. We have, in part, killed off active support, which is one of our great selling points, which I think was a massive mistake. We haven't created strong enough identities for some of our clubs. Melbourne Victory may be an exception to that because they seemingly do have quite a strong identity. Maybe you can say the same about Sydney FC to an extent, one or two others. But overall, the A-League clubs need to be more connected to their communities. They need to have a stronger identity so people feel a sense of connection, a sense of ownership with those clubs. And we need to be a unified sport across all levels.
Did you hear it? Simon fucking Hill said it. We copped it.
He summed it up in a much better,
Well,
more diplomatic way than the way you screamed at the camera.
He's a genius. I'm just some idiot. But
Passion is good. Passion is good.
But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We copped it.
Yeah.
Because we said they lack identity and in some ways culture. But, that's not to say that we're not going to support or whatever. It's just and that's brilliant how Simon's worded it. And half the reason I stopped going as much was because they stifled the active support because I was very active.
It's a problem, but
Yeah.
but it's again and some of it is about education because it's not part of Australian mainstream culture. So we need to have better relationships with police, with authorities. Yeah, it would help if the media was a little bit fairer. But again, you look at the vested interests in large parts of the media. They're heavily financially invested in rugby league, Aussie rules cricket. So of course they're not going to, be on our side in that regard. Yeah. So there's a lot of obstacles to it, but I think we can be as a game a lot smarter with how we work and support our own sport.
I want to thank you for being a defender of the game and I guess always speaking out in such an eloquent way. And it's even with the MacArthur stuff that's recently happened. I was sitting at the dinner table and my mum goes, "Oh shit, Jerome, have you seen this?" And I go, yeah, turn it up. And then you popped up and I go, "Oh shit, I'm talking to him on Friday." And my mum's like, "Oh, no way." And just the way you spoke about it, we need more people like Simon Hill that are going to defend the game but not yell like me. And
I yell a bit too.
No, but it's fine. And you know what? It's full circle to what you said about what Les Murray said to you when you first come on board, which is interesting because we said a similar thing about our podcast, which was like, we really want to help grow the game. It's a mission.
And the mission goes on.
Mission, yeah.
Before we wrap, is there anything you're really looking forward to in the future, exciting coming up for you? A rest. Are you doing any Euros coverage at all? No.
I'm off to the UK to watch it in a very much more friendly time zone.
Brilliant.
And to have a bit of downtime because it's been a long season. I started with the Women's World Cup last July, Asian Cup in the middle, all the rest of the A-League. So, I'm ready for a bit of a rest.
And could top it off with an England.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice.
I got to say, you don't think it's going to happen?
No. We're two at. I reckon we're 2, maybe 3 players short. I don't think our goalkeeper's good enough. Sorry, Jordan Pickford.
Yeah.
I think we are a world-class centre-back away. Harry Maguire. Sorry, Harry. And I think at left-back we've got a problem. If Luke Shaw's our number 1 choice. Nothing against him. He's a good player.
No, I know what you mean.
I don't think he's... I think there are a couple of little holes. In midfield and attack, England have got a world-class team.
I'm telling you right now,
no question.
If Bellingham, Rice, Foden, Palmer, he has to play.
I agree.
If they get going, it's going to be long for the other teams, but I fully agree with Simon at the back there. Walker has to step up heavily. It's a shame James isn't going because I felt like he would have been good, but that's for another time. Simon, thank you so much. Honestly, I could go on forever about how much you've inspired me and other football fans across the country. Thank you for your time as well. I know you're a busy guy, so fully appreciate it. Go check out his book, guys. And the mission goes on, I guess, at the end of the day. Suited and booted, Simon Hill, thank you very much. We out.